so I'm back for another chapter of a Read Aloud. I moved it outside this time. It's too nice to be sitting inside, so I thought I'd bring our Read Aloud outside, and Max came with us too. Can you see him behind me? He's enjoying some fresh air too. So we are on to chapter 8, which is called A Hidden Place. And last time we left off, Connor and Alex read the wishing spell, and they were figuring out some of the riddles, so they knew where to find the items they had to gather, and they realized they're probably going to be in Land of Stories longer than they originally thought. So I'm going to start reading, and if you hear any interruptions, it's probably just the cars driving by, maybe the neighbors saying hello from a distance. We'll see what happens. All right, it's called A Hidden Place. The northern tip of the Sleeping Kingdom was an ugly and vacant place. It was known for its bare trees, bumpy paths, and dangerously high cliffs. Small stones were scattered on the earth, making it nearly impossible to travel by carriage. Even though it rained every so often, nothing ever grew, making it impossible for any animals to live there. So, do you think that the Sleeping Kingdom seems like a positive place to live? Does it have a positive connotation, or does it seem more negative? What do you think? Things never grow there. They have dangerous high cliffs, bumpy paths. It's vacant. Really, animals don't live there. That doesn't sound like a very great place to live, does it? No, I would say it has a negative connotation. So think about that's the setting of our story right now. So our setting, think about what kind of mood that setting is giving to our story, because we know a lot of times the setting drives the plot, right? So think about where our plot's going to head right now. In the middle of this dry and deserted place was a small castle surrounded by a deep and empty moat. It was ancient and made of dark bricks, wooden doors, and had been empty through years of decay. No one knew who had built the castle or why it had been built. But then again, very few people even knew of its existence. The inside of the castle was covered in a thick layer of dust. Cobwebs almost as old as the castle were found on every windowsill, even though there were no spiders to be found. All of the rooms and corridors were empty except for the occasional decrepit chair or table placed in the corner. The great hall completed the eastern wing of the castle. Floor-length windows bordered the hall, letting in a lot of light, but they were so old that the glass distorted the outside world. So this is really describing the setting of the story. Okay, so make sure you're paying attention, because remember, that's going to set the mood, okay? The castle wouldn't have been a less desirable place to be, but for one woman, it was the perfect place to hide. Who do you think is hiding in this deserted, desolate, abandoned castle that very few people know about? Who's on the run? Do you remember who escaped from prison? Uh-oh. Somehow, the evil queen had escaped the dungeons of Snow White's palace. She managed to get a hold of her magic mirror and traveled to a place where she knew she would never be found. The castle acted as the perfect sanctuary, where she could finish the work she had started long ago. Do we know what work she'd started? We don't know much about her story yet, do we? Other than it seems pretty tragic. Let's keep listening, because when she was in the very beginning of the story, she had I was pretty interested in what she was telling Snow White, so I'm interested to hear more. The evil queen was not a stranger to this place. Over the last century or so, many people had come to the castle, but only she and a few others were fortunate enough to have left it, including someone the former queen had not seen in a great while. She had recently sent word to this old friend, asking him to come and aid her. And so she waited for him to arrive, knowing that he would any day now, for he owed her his life. Let's think back to Snow White and Brainstorm here. Do we know like somebody who would owe the queen his life, someone who really helped her throughout the story? The evil queen. Did she have someone who like did things for her? I don't know. You guys probably know the story better than I do. Can you think of anybody? Be brainstorming here. The evil queen stood facing her magic mirror with open palms and closed eyes. She was quite calm for being the most wanted woman alive. To her right, resting on a short stool, was the heart of stone she had always kept so close. Although it was one of the most infamous objects in all of the kingdoms, very few people had ever seen the evil queen's magic mirror. Many believed it was made of glamorous materials like gold and diamonds and glass so pure they would swear they could walk through it. In reality, the mirror was tall and wide with a black frame that peaked at the top. Tangled vines made of cast iron wove through the frame. The reflection was cloudy, as if it were a glass doorway with very cold and fog into a very cold and foggy place. Although there was very little moisture in the air, precipitation dripped down the glass. Does it sound as glamorous and beautiful as everyone pictured it to be? It's kind of foggy. It's got just a basic black frame made out of like cast iron. So think about like that metal that you typically see, kind of like that pole back behind me. That's kind of like a cast iron, and like that black color. Yeah. Does it sound as fancy like diamonds and rare gemstones? It really doesn't sound that special, does it? That's interesting. And it's kind of cloudy, and like precipitation. That's like when say you have like a glass outside on a hot day, and you get that condensation on the outside of the glass. It's kind of like drippy wet. Or like when you get out of the shower sometimes and like the mirror has water running down it. Yeah, that's precipitation. That's what they're talking about. It's always kind of like just like wet. Not what I picture for the magic mirror, huh? The evil queen opened her eyes and gazed deep into the mirror. Mirror, mirror on the wall, how long until the huntsman answers my call? She asked it. The huntsman. Do you remember him in Snow White? What did he do for the queen? Uh-oh. The ghostly silhouette of a man appeared in the reflection. It spoke slowly and softly, with a low and hoarse voice. While my queen awaits her friend, once dear, the huntsman travels very near. The man in the mirror slowly faded away. Within moments, 3 loud knocks came from the other side of the great hall door. You may enter, the queen said. The doors opened, creaking terribly, and a man entered the hall. He was tall, broad, and just on the verge of old age. He wore a variety of animal skins and had a limp in his right leg. His beard was light brown and graying. A crossbow was attached to his back. A large hunting knife hung from his waist. My huntsman has returned, the evil queen said. The huntsman walked across the hall to where the evil queen was standing. It's been a long time since I've seen your face, she said, and I still find it hard to stomach looking at you. Look at Max back there. I think he heard the car and he's loving life right now. The huntsman fell to his knees and wept at her feet. What does wept mean? He's weeping at her feet. Yeah, he's crying. Yeah. Your Majesty, the huntsman cried, please forgive me, for I may never forgive myself after failing you. What did he fail the queen at doing? Do you remember? What was a huntsman supposed to do in Snow White? The evil queen looked down at him coldly. She had no sympathy left inside of her for anyone. After all you have... Oh, sorry, wrong character. After all you had done for me, after the mercy you showed me, I could not kill the princess in the forest. Remember, he was supposed to kill Snow White. And is she dead? Remember the evil queen took it into her own hands and fed her the poison apple? And then she was awakened by true love's first kiss. Plan didn't work. The huntsman said, and just look at all the pains this has caused you. Had I just done as you asked, you would still be queen. The evil queen let his pathetic sobs continue for a while longer. She showed no signs of forgiveness. He deserved to feel this way. She stepped away from the huntsman and peered through a window at a lifeless land that surrounded them. You and I were both prisoners in this castle once, the evil queen said. I never imagined that one day it would act as my only refugee. You saved me, the huntsman said, and I surely would have died here had it not been for you. That is why I swore to you that I would do anything to assist you with your mission. I'm gonna wait for that loud vehicle to pass. Somebody's out enjoying their day riding around in like a golf cart. It was pretty loud, wasn't it? That is why I swore I would do anything to assist you with your mission. But I failed you. After all this time, I am still on the same mission as I was back then. So do not cry, old friend. I have called you for a chance for redemption. What does redemption mean? Remember the prefix re means. Re means again. Good. So he has a chance at redemption. And that means that he can redeem himself and have another chance. Try again. She walked back to him and gently placed a hand on his cheek. The huntsman stopped crying and looked at the queen with huge, sad eyes. Redemption? The huntsman asked. You mean, Your Majesty, you're giving me a chance to serve you after what I've done? The huntsman's tears quadrupled. Quad means 4. So they got 4 times as many. They quadrupled in size, and he continued sobbing. Curse this world for claiming you to be any less than the saint that you are. I'd kill every person who tarnished your name if I could. Do you think the evil queen is a saint? She tried to kill Sleeping Beauty, didn't she? I don't know if that would qualify her as a saint, but this is his perception of her, isn't it? That won't be necessary, the evil queen said. I have another task for you. It requires a great deal of traveling, and since being the most wanted fugitive alive prevents me from doing it myself, I've called you here. The huntsman grew quiet and lowered his head and shamefully. Your greatness, he said. I have grown too old to travel. I can barely even walk as it is. The evil queen looked down at him with an angry brow. This is an angry brow. Someone gives you that face with those brows, they're not happy, are they? You imbecile, she said, raising her voice. You mean to tell me that you traveled all this way here to tell me that you are useless? The huntsman rose to his feet with difficulty. Not at all, my queen, he said. Please let me explain. I am far too old to serve you, but my daughter is able and willing to help you complete what I cannot. I don't know the huntsman had a daughter, did you? I guess a lot of time has passed since the last time he served the queen. Daughter? The evil queen asked. The doors at the end of the hall opened again. This time, a woman entered, dragging a large wagon behind her. She was tall and thin, with hair so dark red that it seemed to have a violet tint. Her eyes were bright green, and her clothes were made entirely of plants and leaves and other greenery. The wagon she pulled contained a very large square object. It was large and flat and covered in silk cloth for safety. After seeing her, the evil queen could recall a time many years ago when she had known the huntsman's daughter. She had always been a shy little girl and had lived with her father in the palace when the queen was on her throne. You've grown up, the queen said. The huntsman's daughter nodded in her direction. You will speak when I address you, the evil queen demanded. My daughter is mute, your majesty, the huntsman said. What does it mean to be mute? She just shook her head at the queen. So if you're mute, think about when you hit the mute button on the TV. It silences us, right? So she's mute, she doesn't talk. That's interesting. She's never said a word in her life. However silent she may be, it does not make her any less capable of doing what you ask of her. She's brought you a gift to prove herself. The huntsman's daughter carefully removed the object from the wagon and gently placed it beside the queen's magic mirror. Once it was positioned correctly, she removed the silk cloth. It was a mirror, smaller than the magic mirror. It was circular with flowers engraved into the square gold frame. The evil queen knew exactly what it was the second it was revealed. The mirror of truth, she said. The former queen had acquired it during her reign. It was another magic mirror that showed one's true self when one stood before it. "How did you get this?" the queen said. "She broke into the palace and retrieved it for you," the huntsman said. The evil queen touched the mirror of truth's frame. She had forgotten the detail in the carvings. She turned and faced the huntsman's daughter. "You shall be my huntress," the evil queen declared. The huntress bowed and kissed the queen's hand. "What is the task at hand, your majesty?" the huntsman asked. "Have you ever heard of the wishing spell?" the evil queen asked. The huntsman and the huntress curiously looked up at one another. "No, my queen," the huntsman said, "unless you're speaking of the old foolish fable." "The very one," the queen said. "I never took it seriously until I recently heard a prisoner in the dungeon mumbling about it moments before his execution. According to the foolish fable, after a group of selected objects are collected and placed together, the collector is granted one wish. It doesn't matter how great or small, the wish is guaranteed to be granted. And, as you know, I have a wish to be granted." Do we know what her wish is? I don't think that we do. I don't anyway. Maybe you guys have figured it out, but I don't know what her wish is. "You want my daughter to collect these items for you then?" the huntsman asked. "Precisely," the evil queen said. "From what I've learned, the task is very dangerous and may take some time. But if she succeeds, I will consider whatever debt you owned dismissed." The huntsman looked to his daughter, and the huntress nodded. "Very well," he said. "She will do it. What are the items you seek, my queen?" The evil queen took her place before the magic mirror, extended her open palm, and gazed deep inside of it. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, what must we seek for the wishing spell that grants it all?" she asked. A ghostly silhouette appeared again. All right, let's see what he says. "Glass that house a lonely soul up till midnight's final toll. A saber from the deepest sea, meant for a groom's mortality. A bark of a basket held in fright while running from a bark with a bite. A stony crown that's made to share, found deep within a savage lair. A needle that pierced a lovely skin of a princess with beauty found within. A wavy lock of golden rope that was once freedom's only hope. Glittering jewels whose value increased after preserving the false deceased. Teardrops of a maiden fairy, neither magical nor merry." What he just recite, guys? We've heard that before. Yeah, that was the wishing spell, wasn't it? Uh-oh. So does someone else know what the wishing spell is? "There you have it," the evil queen said to the huntsman and the huntress. But the magic mirror was not finished. "But listen to this, my fair queen, for I offer you a fair warning. For one wish you are willing to pay any price, unaware that the wishing spell can only happen twice. And the spell can only happen once more, for it was already used once before. In this castle as we stand, a duo moves throughout the land." Who's that duo? "A young brother and sister collect at a quick pace and may defeat my queen in the wishing spell race." The man in the mirror faded away, leaving the queen with a worst possible news. Not only was someone else after the objects she needed, but if they were used before she could collect them, the spell could never be used again. She closed her eyes and thought about what her next move would be. She couldn't afford to have any more odds stacked against her. After a lifetime of work, she wasn't about to let the children stand in her way. "I want you to start retrieving the items," the evil queen said to the huntress. "I will handle the brother and sister now. Leave me." The huntsman and huntress bowed and left the evil queen alone in the great hall. The evil queen stood before the mirror of truth. Years after being prisoner had taken tolls on her appearance. It was painful to see the aging woman whose reflection she had become. She picked up her heart of stone and examined it closely, lightly stroking its sides. The evil queen looked back up at the mirror of truth. This time, there was no reflection of the disheveled woman she had grown into. This time, the face staring back at her was a youthful one. It belonged to a beautiful young maiden with pale skin and long dark hair. She wore a long white dress with a matching ribbon tied around her waist and was also holding a heart of stone. The girl smiled, but the evil queen did not smile back. She knew the girl in the mirror very well, and she was not Snow White. I was starting to think that kind of described her, didn't it? And that's the end of the chapter. So we kind of had a new setting of the evil queen, kind of to learn more of that plot that's going on. Because remember, what's the problem in the story? What's the problem if we're going to start talking about the plot structure? Yeah, the problem is that Connor and Alex are stuck in the fairy tale world and they need to retrieve the wishing spell. So we're going to do that rising action where they're going to start, the exciting part's going to start building and building and building until we get to that climax, right? And we've added another layer to this with now there's somebody else trying to also achieve the wishing spell, and only one of them is going to be able to do it. So next time we read, it's going to be chapter 9, The Charming Kingdom. So think about whose kingdom we're going to be in next time. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon. Oh, hey, guys. Bye.